swimrun is in that magical age when like the people that are doing it, you're just de facto part of a kind of club, like this weird, odd kid athlete club that you're just like, hey, look at what we're doing.
Welcome to the Low Tide Boys, a Swimrun podcast. I'm Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 160 of the show. On this week's show, we have an exclusive. You won't find this anywhere else, folks, for the obvious reasons. We have a first look at the new Sunriver and Elk Lake Swimruns, which are happening this year in Bend, Oregon, with race director and endurance racing legend Jason Magness of Bend Racing. This episode isn't a course preview per se, but we've got a lot of cool details that will make any swimrunner check to see what flights are looking like for, early May.
Yeah, that's our goal.
And then late July.
Absolutely. But first, training update. Well, if it wasn't official on the show before, it is now. Our first race this season will be the Sunriver Swimrun on May 7th in Bend, Oregon. Our training is starting to ramp up accordingly, but now it's all about building that base.
That base.
Get that base. Put down the base miles in the pool, the base yards, base meters. Mm-hmm. Base meters in the pool and
and you're putting those meters in for the two of us. So thank you.
That's fine. I've accepted my fate as long-standing swim lead. But
Yay.
Now on to this week's shout out.
All right, so our shout out this week goes out to our newest patron on Patreon, Greg. He is racing Swimrun Lake James in a few months, and he's doing Attila Uta a few months after that. So awesome. Lake James is going to be his first swim run. He's been listening to the show, getting tips. Thanks so much for your support. Happy training.
Yeah.
It'll be a blast.
Nice. Welcome, Greg. Welcome to the Swimrun family of the Low Tide Boys.
Welcome.
Now, why don't you keep it over there, Chris, for a new segment. New segment alert.
All right, so the new segment we're lovingly calling the Wisdom Nugget of the Week. So, long story short, in 2014, Mark Allen, 6-time Ironman World Champion, wrote a book called The Art of Competition, which he self-published, and it included a ton of inspirational quotes coupled with amazing photography. In 2014, I was also in the height of my triathlon phase.
Peak triathlon. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you were there too.
I was right. We were peaking at the peak of then.
And Mark Allen was self-publishing this book. It's like, hey, Mark Allen, love this guy, legend. Let me get this book. So basically, it's been sitting on my shelf, and my son recently found a book and has been asking us to read it to him. And my wife just thinks that these quotes kind of read like endurance fortune cookies. And here we are. So we'll be sharing one a week. Maybe not all from this book, but this book is full of a lot of wisdom nuggets. So the first one, and just think about this one for a little bit. Beating an opponent at their game is tough. Beating them at yours is not. What do you think about that, Chip?
I love it. And it's a great reminder. And I think this is what this is why we're so pumped about the segment, is that it just gets you kind of thinking. Maybe one thing here or there can help your mindset and help you get on a better path or change direction, or just get you right as rain. But the way I'm kind of interpreting this is like, don't worry about what the fuck everyone else is doing. Worry about yourself. It's the only thing you can control. And don't worry about trying to be faster than Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo on the bike or the swim or the run or whatever. Focus on you and nail that consistency. That's the only thing you got to worry about.
Got to run your race. Got to play your game.
Absolutely. It's easy to win at your own game when you're making up the rules yourself. So focus on that.
Hell yeah.
And that's this week's nugget. Wisdom nugget.
Let us know.
Are we taking submissions? We'll take nugget submissions.
Yeah, sure. Let us know what you think. If you think it's a bad idea, let us know.
Now, for this week's Feats of Endurance. This week's winner is our friend Miriam. She's half of the team PB and Bananas, one of our faves up in Petaluma, California. She's training for her first marathon, which is taking place in just over a month. So over the weekend, she logged a stout 30K training run, her longest run ever to date. Strong work. We're all cheering for you here. You know where else you can cheer for Marion? Head on over to the Low Tide Boys Strava Club. There's over 500.
I know, it's wild.
500 people in the Low Tide Boys Strava Club. So go Strava, search Low Tide Boys, find Marion's 30K run, give it a kudos, smash that like button, and dish out kudos and receive kudos from swim runners all around the globe.
It's good stuff.
It is great. Now, kicking it over to Chris at the news desk for This Week in Swimrun.
All right, and now for the news. I don't know.
Why is that so funny?
I don't know. All right, Swimrun Australia has announced that their Sydney East Swimrun will be taking place on April 29th. This race was last held in 2019 and has been canceled the last few years due to COVID. We're happy to see it back, but whatever you do not look at the course maps. They are 100% guaranteed to give you FOMO.
Don't look at them.
It's like in a bay. It's on a beach. It's
in Australia.
It's in Australia. Anyone want to head over to Bali for a swim run? It's rhetorical. Yes, obviously, yes. Well, the Bali Hope Swim Run is happening on September 30th. The course is a 22.5 kilometer event that features a boat jump start and a swim to shore, which is always an awesome way to start a swim run.
Ooh.
We don't have too many of those. Rockman probably being the best example of how awesome that is.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's in Bali, in case you need any other any other reason to go. Uruguay Swimrun's La Paloma Swim Run is fast approaching on February 5th. We love seeing events that are taking place in South America, and we're hoping to have someone from Uruguay Swimrun Brass, race director or whatever, on the show soon to chat about the growing scene over there. Finally, Swimrun Christmas, a.k.a. Attila, the Swimrun World Championship Ranking Selection Announcement Day, is just a week away.
It's almost here.
Best of luck to everyone vying for a slot at the OG swim run that started it all.
Get your points. Well, at the time of this show, it's too late.
Yeah.
So you can't submit, but just cross them fingers.
Yes. If you have ability to time travel and you're listening to this and you can go back, you have until 25th at midnight Swedish time to submit.
So 9 a.m. or sometime in the morning.
Yes.
In the States, the
Yes.
United States.
Yes. So if you have time travel technology, you're all set. If not,
stay tuned to the IG at the Low Tide Boys for all
it'll be a big
Attila meme day. It's one of our favorites to drop some historic.
Yep. I'm already stacking.
They're percolating.
Yeah, I already have like 3 or 4. So it's great.
I should let me flex that muscle. I'll contribute to this as well.
For sure. Anyway, that's it for this week. Sorry for that major tangent. Reach out to us if there's any swimmer news that you'd like for us to share on the show.
Now, on to a little bit of show business. So, do you enjoy our brand of super niche content and witty dad humor? If so, there's 2 ways you can help us get more people into the sport of swimrun. First, if you haven't before, take a moment to leave a review on Apple Podcast or rating on Spotify. Links for those things are in the show notes here. This is great and actually helps new people discover the show and allows us to justify to our wives why we need more pool buoys, more wetsuits, paddles. You get the idea.
Help us.
Secondly, consider supporting our efforts on Patreon. Your support helps us keep the lights on, fund the new stickers that we give away at all of our events, helps us travel and enter more races as well. Additionally, our patrons get a bonus discount on all Low Tide, a steep discount, I might add, on Low Tide Boys merch, access to Patreon exclusive Zoom meetups, and of course, random gifts of kindness from us at random times.
Very random.
And early access. If there's a new sticker that's dropping,
oh yeah,
you better believe if you're on the Patreon list, you're getting that thing first.
Yeah, pretty much. Anytime we get new anything, I already have everyone's address. I just go on.
Yeah, it's really
I don't even tell them.
a nice thing. I'm constantly tickled and amazed on the amount of support that we get, just from anyone sending us a really awesome DM to an email to donating, $5 a month to us on Patreon. It's all it really is quite amazing, and big thank you from both of us. But without any further ado, let's jump in to our conversation with Jason Magness of Bend Racing.
Yeah, so if this name sounds familiar, we recently had Jason on the show as part of our One Water Race recap series in episode 147 when we interviewed Team Bend Racing. Besides being an adventure racing legend, Jason is a race director that organizes like awesome adventure races, by all accounts.
Yeah.
This year, he's adding 2 Swimruns to his list of events. And in this interview, we chatted with Jason about what inspired him to create these 2 events. We get sort of an overview, like bird's eye view of where these events are and what the vibe's going to be. And we chat about why new events are so important for the growth of the sport. This was like a super fun chat, and it got me like so hopeful. I mean, I'm obviously super stoked on Swimrun, and I would consider us the chief evangelists of Swimrun in America, maybe the world, maybe. Like, it just fills me with so much enthusiasm that there's folks putting some roots down and being like, hey, we think this is awesome. We think we can put on some awesome
Absolutely.
events. It's super cool.
And I mean, one thing that comes through right away is just his passion for producing, not just, I'm trying to make an extra whatever amount of dollars, let me put a swimrun event, but like he gets it. Yeah. And he has chosen 2 different locations. And again, this is the beauty of Swimrun, right? You have one that's more river based and then an alpine one. I mean, it's just really incredible.
Yep.
The opportunity that Bend has for a swimrun scene. And being West Coasters as well, we're super excited to see more events popping up over here. But we'll be there in May.
It's gonna be
at
awesome.
Sunriver.
It's gonna be awesome. But so you'll the enthusiasm is infectious. Like we mentioned at the beginning, like after listening to this, you're going to be checking out what flights look like because it's going to be so much fun.
Yes. So without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Jason Magness.
This has to be this is a special treat for everyone because we usually don't get a return guest for months, maybe even years. But pretty soon, after we recorded the One Water Race recap episode with Bend Racing, welcome back to the show, Jason Magness, and we're here to talk about some new swim runs, which we're super stoked about. Welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks, guys. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're very happy that you're here. I guess first question. There's 2 new races in America, which is amazing because you pretty much just like increase the percentage of races in America by like 20%, which is awesome. Why don't we talk about sort of the Bend Racing sort of race direction, event production side of things rather than sort of the adventure racing side of things, and what kind of got you to want to put on a couple swim runs?
Yeah, I think I've always been fascinated with the sports that are kind of on the fringe. And, for lack of a better way to say it, kind of like the next endurance test. Mm-hmm. And so I remember when Swimrun first started, hearing about it and thinking I was a swimmer through the first couple of years of college and then triathlete. And I was like, oh, this sounds cool. But I was pretty wrapped up in adventure racing and putting on races as well as racing. And, I always kind of thought about getting into Swimrun. And it just like with a lot of people, it took me doing one. Right. And seeing firsthand, other than just knowing the idea was cool, but like going out and doing a swim run and then starting to do a couple more, it's just such a cool sport. It really has, I think to me, it's the best kind of bridge between, like an endurance triathlon or something with a marked course, but you also get this element of adventure, which is obviously super important and near and dear to my heart as an adventure racer. And as soon as I started looking through the guise of being an event director, like I know how to put on good events. I know how to put on hard events that really challenge people and draw people and to bring in all the scenic elements and all the things that make the suffering worth it. And so I just had to kind of, I'm to be honest, I'm learning some things about Swimrun right as we go. It's really
we all
cool.
are.
Everyone, we are too.
Yeah. I'm learning all kinds of stuff. Like back 5-8 years ago when I first heard about it, I have a twin brother that lives in New Zealand and does a bunch of swimming, and he got really into this idea. And so we were practicing swim runs, just kind of setting our own courses. And that was the day when we were like, should we get tiny shoes and stick them in oversized flippers and then carry the flipper? Like, it seems like kind of all the elite racers are doing the same thing these days. But 8 years ago, I remember being fascinated because it was like this wide open world of like to tow or not to tow and to flippers and fins and everything, which is pretty cool that there's still a lot of everybody's looking for an edge. You're looking for a way to survive, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, your first true swimmer experience, you just jumped straight into the deep end with a couple cinder blocks tied to your feet, and that was the one water race, a multi-day 250-kilometer event across the whole entire Stockholm archipelago there. Tell me,
right?
What and the just such a epic, awesome event that Chris and I we can't help but be so drawn to. But I'd love to hear sort of what inspiration did you take from one water race when you thought how you could apply that to the town that you live in Bend, Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, really wasn't until I was standing on the coast of Ardhoma or whatever that race started, like looking out at the archipelago, where it was just like, this sport is so obvious, right? Like when you're in Sweden and you're looking out at that and you're an athlete, that is what speaks to you. Like you can't get to those islands or kayaking, or you can't beach them because they're all rock covered, and you're just like, I could swim out to that one and run. I mean, it's pretty cool. And so being there made me realize just how cool of a sport it was. And then, obviously, did a bunch of training last summer and didn't really even think about it as an event director. But then after being in Sweden, I was like, man, Bend has amazing spots. And, talking to that race director and just getting really inspired by his vision and, for lack of a better way to say, his stoke. Like he had so much enthusiasm for what he was doing. And then I came home and I started to look at swimruns, and I was like, man, there's not that many in the States, and they all seem really cool, but there's not the first swimrun I'm putting on, which hopefully will go well. I'm a very experienced director, but like it is the only swimrun I've really ever heard of that is based solely on a river. Like you're going to be swimming in the iconic Deschutes River. Luckily, I'm not a masochist, so you're swimming mostly downriver. And I say mostly, there's a few surprises, but like it is a river that is really fun. And I've trained in it a bunch because you get extra speed, who doesn't like that as an endurance athlete? You look at you look at the map and be like, oh my God, this, it's got a couple 1.2 or 1.5 kilometer swims, but you got to remember that the river's moving. And so you get out of those swims and you're just like, man, I'm fast.
PRs all over all day long.
Yeah. And just, I set the course or kind of tested it out with Renee, who was also in the one water race with us.
Yeah.
And we just had so much fun. Like this is a river that is in our backyard that we, kind of float on and sup, and, everybody does those classic river things and very few people swim it. And we're like, man, it's a pretty cool thing. So it's, there's going to be I don't want to give away too much, but I guess you can in swimrun. I'm so used to adventure racing where it's like, you have to say nothing, but in swimrun I can say whatever
you can tell everybody anything you want.
Exactly.
Yeah. The details. But yeah, there's going to be a rope swing in it. So one of the water entries is a rope swing out over the river, which is
nice.
Really cool. There's one upriver section where smart racers will swim across the river and like walk in the shallows, rather than, because we tried to do some upriver swimming, and that's the opposite. It could take you, 20 minutes to go 200 meters, which is not very fun.
Yeah, it's no fun.
But yeah, it's just been really cool exploring my landscape here with this guise of this simplicity. Like as much as I love adventure racing, there's something to be said about a wetsuit and a pair of running shoes, and you're not swapping anything. You're just going.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many little magical elements to it, and I'm curious, sort of as a race director, now that you've experienced it firsthand and you're put on these events. I mean, I can imagine if it's a place where you train a lot, you just have this new sort of patina that you're looking at things like, oh, you could totally swim run across this, and you could totally run here and jump in here. You could exit over there. Is that kind of how the idea and the course kind of came together, of you just using your creativity with this like swim run lens of what's possible out there?
Yeah, I think, and it was very refreshing to get outside. Like I design a lot of adventure race courses, and that's my main thing. And so I kind of have these design constraints that I work with for what makes a really good adventure race course. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that those didn't necessarily apply to swimrun. Like I could use a smaller area and loop back and swim this area and then come back by that on the land and then cross over here. Like you can make a really cool course because everybody's doing the same thing, where you include all these elements that are in a fairly, smallish area. I don't have to, find a course that is linearly like 25 miles, and so it's kind of nice. And I don't mind making a short course and a long course at the same time. And also, I feel a little bit safer in that sense that even if teams get spread out, there's a little bit more of an area, like even the Alpine Lake race that we're doing up at Elk Lake that has a couple lakes that you're going through, but it's a more defined area for all kinds of things. And I think the biggest thing that I'm struggling with is aid stations. I've never put together an aid station in my life. So I have been warned. I'm really good friends with Brent, who puts on the Odyssey Swimruns, and he's very similar to me. He started with adventure races. And so he's been telling me, the story of his first swim run race where his aid station was like, a couple cups of water and 5 half bananas. Cause he's like, nobody's going to stop and eat anything. And then you've got all these swim runners that are like wanting, a full aid station where they can eat. Right. And he's like, oh, we ran out of bananas after the first 20 people. He was,
got to go to the grocery store.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about kind of learning that and knowing that the speed is going to be, I think for a lot of the athletes coming out there, swim runners tend to be, I know there's a lot of recreationalists, but a lot of the ones that I've met are really good athletes. And so, trying to anticipate the speed and the spread and all that kind of stuff. What do you guys think? Like, you guys have done a bunch of races, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
How does it get pretty spread out there?
Yeah, it's depends really kind of on the mechanics of it, I guess. We actually did a river swim run in the Sacramento River in Folsom. Cool. And that was actually a water start. So everyone swam out and kind of waited in the area, and they said go, and you started from a swim, which was something that we hadn't done, but I guess they took swim run as to be very literal, as you need to start with swim and then you can run after. Awesome. But it'll naturally, I think allowing people to self-seed, if you will. Like if you start with a mile run or less, that kind of allows the pack, like if you want to go off on your pony and chase it up front, go for it. If you want to hang back and do your own casual thing, it kind of gives that opportunity for some self-seeding. And then, I think something that Chris and I always have enjoyed is just the not racing other teams, but interacting and the jockeying that you get with other teams. Oh, maybe we'll pass them in the water, and then sure enough, a quarter mile down, they're charging past us on the run, or vice versa, and you kind of have a little engagement with some of the other people, and that's something that we found to be just it adds another layer of fun to something that we already are really enjoying.
Right.
Yeah, and it's such a shared experience, not just with your partner, but with sort of everyone else that's just doing the course. It's like, yeah, you're joking around and having a bunch of laughs before it starts. Then it starts and everyone's racing, and at the end, you're just right back to where you were because you all had this shared experience. It's a super niche sport that's kind of, let's be honest, kind of weird. And by sharing that, I'm sure it's similar in adventure racing. Like the conversations you have with adventure racers before and after a race are probably very similar. Of like, hey, wasn't that thing crazy? Like, can you imagine that thing? And I think that, just echoing everything Chipro said, I think it will spread out somewhat, but I think you'll find that there's going to be just a lot of camaraderie, everyone helping each other if needed, and you'll have the fast people that are going there to crush, and that's great because you need that too, I think, for a healthy race. But everyone has a good time.
And I think the thing I'm excited about, and again, I'm pretty new to the community, is I am trying to draw on, obviously I've got to mark the course, but I'm trying to make there be some adventurous sections, if that makes sense, like stuff that is not necessarily on trail, some stuff that that were people that can move fast with it, like that proprioceptive skill of the Rocky Shore. I mean, I've seen all the images from like the races all over, and some of them look like you're covering some pretty aggressive terrain, and some of them look pretty, like more trails and roads kind of thing.
I think that point is really well taken because I think, when you think of one of the things that makes Swimrun different, and one of the reasons, that we like it, just speaking for Chipper and myself, is the fact that it is super challenging and you have these kind of like super sketchy sections. where, yeah, you could have, and this is a very Ottawa thing to do. There's a nice beach that you could swim out and, transition smoothly, beautifully onto the trail.
Make it easy on everybody.
No. You got to go up on the rocks and go out that way, because that just makes it more of an experience. So I think making it challenging like that, I think, obviously within reason, obviously, but rope swings, that's awesome. I don't know of a swim run that has a rope swing feature. We have cliff jumps, we have dock jumps, we have all kinds of stuff.
Waterfall climbs at Swimrun.
Waterfall climbs, yep.
Cool,
but rope swing would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll get rope swing and some lava rock, and it's Central Oregon, so it's pretty fast to run just through open forest and bushwhack a little bit. I figure if I'm going to test it on my wetsuit, if I don't get too many dings, then it goes, because I'm pretty clumsy. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
I love it. So that gives us Sunriver, which is going to be coming up on May 7th, I believe. Mm-hmm. And then if one wasn't enough, two's better, right? So Elk Lake Swim Run, which is on July 23rd. Tell us about that location and how you came up with the thought that that'd be a good spot for swim running.
Yeah, Elk Lake is up in the mountains. It's up above or kind of on the backside of Mount Bachelor, which is our iconic ski resort, right in this chain of volcanoes called the Cascades. And there's just all these small alpine lakes. And, a bunch of them are protected by wilderness, but there's a series of them, Elk Lake and Lava Lake and Hosmer and Spark Lake, that are all kind of in this area that's not designated wilderness that, we play in all the time, and never really thought of them as swimming lakes. For some reason, a lot of people sail in them, and maybe Oregonians think of the lakes as cold. So people jump in and jump out. And then we went out and tested this, I think it was October, and the water was warm. It just, sits there in this alpine sun, and it's crystal clear, and you're swimming across this thing. And every time you breathe on, your left or right side, depending on which way you're going, you've got Mount Bachelor and the Three Sisters that'll still have snow on them. It's just amazing. And then, you're running through the lava beds and the high alpine forest to another lake, and, crossing that. So it's just a really cool, and it's up at 6,000 feet, right? So crisp, clean air. And it was amazing. I thought it was going to be colder than Sunriver. When I tested these both kind of back to back, I was, Elk Lake is going to be up there. It's, really cold alpine environment, and the river's much colder than those lakes in the middle of summer. So
interesting. So I totally didn't catch on the fact that this is going to be a high altitude, relatively high altitude swim run. That's also a very unique feature that pretty much everything else is at sea level. Obviously, more closer to sea level.
I didn't think of that, but it will be. I'll send you guys the exact elevation, but it's the base is going to be between 5 and 6.
Awesome,
nice. And it's stunning up there. But I'm really excited. Both of them, both the Sunriver one and the Elk Lake one, they're kind of a outdoor tourist thing. There's a lodge there, there's camping there, there's cabins that you can rent at either place. And so as far as for family goes, or for extending the vacation, if you come all the way to Bend to do the swim run, you should stick around, come a few days early, stick around, do some mountain biking, do some more alpine swimming or kayaking or whatever. It's just, it has really everything. For those of you people that want to come in May, you could combine a ski vacation and a swim run, because the mountain is still open for skiing usually until May 15th. Wow. I know it's going to be kind of cool to see what the weather does and what these are like, but I'm super excited. So.
Yeah, and it's no secret to us that Bend, Oregon is really a hotbed for endurance athletes, runners, mountain bikers, you name it. It feels like if you have an REI membership, you want living in Bend is possibly a mandatory situation for you. Yeah. So how do you think kind of the local endurance community will take on to these races that you're putting on?
We're already getting some really cool feedback. Bend, like a lot of places, it is this bastion of endurance athletes. But again, it just shows how new Swimrun is, because we're getting, emails from local athletes that are like, what is, I'm a triathlete. What is this Swimrun thing?
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited because, obviously if we can keep this race up for a couple of years, then you're going to have elite swim runners coming out of Bend that found out about it by, having an empty weekend on their calendar and saying, hey, I'm going to go try this race. Right. So there's just so many athletes and it will be interesting. I'm really expecting, they have a pretty good swim scene here. Like there's a master swim program and a bunch of people that do these open water swims. Probably not as much as a lot of places, but so I'm hoping some of those will like not be intimidated by the run part. And then obviously, I'm sure we'll get a bunch of triathletes out and we've got like, it's cool. I'm really good friends. We've got a famous ultra runner, Max King, that's on our team.
Yeah,
now
for
on
sure.
our racing team. And so like we've done a bunch of training with him and, he swims. I just found out he actually swims, but he thinks he's not a good swimmer, but he did years of triathlons. And I'm like, dude, doesn't matter. You could doggy paddle and then you're going to put down
you would destroy. I mean, talk about a ringer. Max King doing swim run.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, you can learn how to swim. Like you can learn how to do anything.
Yeah.
Or just get towed by your partner.
Yeah. By the way, Chipper, Max King is the guy who won Way Too Cool 50K.
The year that we did
the
it?
year when you smoked us by like 3 hours.
3 hours.
Yeah, that sounds like...
Yeah, he's a beast. He's a total beast. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, one thing we mention a lot on the show is like, hey, if you're a triathlete and you're training for triathlon, you can already do a swim run. If you're already swimming and running in some combination of the two, like you can show up and do it. And yeah, you need a little bit of gear, but you don't really need that much gear. So I'm just going to be really curious to see because, again, another thing we see on the show, it's like, hey, if we really want the sport to grow in the U.S., you have to have local races that people can get to where it isn't like a huge thing. Like for us in California, you'd think there'd be a ton of races here. We have literally like one local race and it's 8 miles long, the long course.
Yeah.
And if we want to do anything heavy, like we got to go to Maine, we have to go to Washington. And I think that just the travel and the expense of that is a little bit of a
barrier. Yeah.
It's just a barrier to entry. So having local races, especially in places where there's already a lot of endurance athletes hanging out, I mean, that's how you create like sort of a hotspot, which is something that we have actually in North Carolina. Because there's a couple of races there. They have the Whitewater Rafting Center, which a ton of swim runners train there because you can just, swim and run all day if you want.
Outdoor playground.
And you see it because there's the sort of like the environment for it. You see a bunch of swim runners. Bend could be the same thing.
Yeah. And that's, I know just from seeing adventure racing growth in Bend in the last 10 years since we've been here, that it will be the same thing. I love Bend and there is like a lot of athletes here kind of have tunnel vision. There's the unique one like Max King that has been awesome because he actually elite level runner, but he just loves going out and suffering and orienteering and swimming and doing whatever. I think the really neat thing that I've been noticing in just working with like the team that I had with One Water Race, and you can find these athletes that really want to be competitive, that either are a little older or not, don't have the training time because of families or whatever. And then you've got the sport that really has those elements of, you need the endurance and the fitness, but a lot of it is this, mental toughness, how efficient you can be with transitions, like how good you can work as a team. Like that's what I love the most is like teamwork is important. And so these people that work together as teams can have a ton of fun basically exploring and being competitive at this brand new thing.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about before when we've had various coaches on as well. I mean, speaking kind of from, if you look at like what's a big target market for Swimrun would be triathletes, obviously. And you're right, there is sort of this tunnel vision of like, well, if the event I'm participating in isn't called a triathlon, there's no way I can possibly do it because it's not moving me forward. But I think what you will find as a triathlete, speaking as a former triathlete, probably will do another one in my life, I'm sure, in the future, but you'll find it's just such refreshing way to be fit and just get out and enjoy it. Yeah. And I think it'll be a really eye-opening experience of how rigid sometimes triathlon can be, and this is like the complete opposite of that. And it's a good balance to have in your training regimen.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think as an event director, it's also great, right? when I first started, there was the pressure to do a regular mountain bike race or do some trail runs, and that just wasn't where my passion was. And so, but I've always kind of been looking to expand, right? And because I know not everybody's into adventure racing, and so it was really amazing for me as an event director to find something, swim run, and talk to my wife and my partners about it, and they're just like, dude, why has there not been a swim run in Bend 10 years ago? And then not to feel like I'm stepping on other toes of other longer term events, because that's what I felt like. I was the new guy, and I wanted to mountain bike race out in a different area and a more rugged style, but there were already 20 mountain bike races, and so I'm like, okay. And I wasn't worried about that, but then there were people just like, hey, why are you putting on a mountain bike race? We already have all that, right? And so it's really nice that Swimrun isn't like, we're just creating a new thing that doesn't exist here, and making it available, not trying to take anybody from anywhere. Because I'm honest, like I don't need to the first couple of years, I'm just going to grow, right? I'm not worried about what my numbers are. I don't have, a huge budget, but we're just going to make it work. And so I'm not really worried about, market share of adventure athletes in Bend.
Right. I think that's a great attitude to have. It's like, it's kind of like a Field of Dreams scenario, right? Like build it and they will come. And it's just like, just put on a quality race. I mean, the word's going to get out. Such a small community. I mean, we already know people that are going to go to Bend from Texas, from Florida, from North Carolina, So it's like people will show up because the folks that are super stoked on Swimrun, like, they want more races. They want new adventures. They want new experiences. I mean, that's one of the things that I think Odyssey Swimrun has done really well, where for a lot of their courses, they sort of switch them up. So Casco, it's never the same race every year. They switch directions, and you have all new things you have to deal with, different currents and things like that. And it just makes it for a really fun experience, whenever that's possible. And I think being agile as a race director, trying to put on cool events, I mean, that's something that this community is always going to be down for. I don't think the Swimrun folks are going to be like, hey, your aid station was, 0.3 kilometers off from where you said it was going to be. And I'm really pissed. It's like, no, that's not the vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. And aid station can just be a giant, couple gallons of water with some gels on a table too. That's actually totally fine. So
a little trash bag right there.
Yeah. Trash bag.
Honestly, a lot of that's probably going to be maybe an easy up. We've got a handful of easy ups, and it is a weird thing because as an adventure racing director, all I need is a bunch of flags, like these little orange and white orienteering flags, and I have to make really good maps. But the infrastructure is a little different that I need. But we're I'm so excited about this that we're already planning. We're going to test it probably next summer. Like we're planning to host a expedition swim run here.
When is it, and are we invited?
We're gonna do honestly, actually, we should talk because it might be really fun to have you guys out to be part of the test team.
I concur with that statement.
And I think we're gonna try to keep the first one to like a 48-hour event, but not quite as one water race. I don't know where they get their money from, but that's like the far end of the spectrum of, when every team gets their own boat. But we actually want to put one that basically swims the entire length of the upper section of the Deschutes, and runs through the lava and runs around and swims and then runs by the waterfalls and all that stuff. It just is this huge journey of a swim run. Because there's ways to make it stay all on public land and get permits for that, and then swims the reservoir and gets out, and it would be a 150-mile swim run.
Oh my God. Wow.
But but you got to remember, it's all downriver, and the river just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's got
that's
more
your
and more
tagline. Don't worry, it's all downriver.
Downriver.
Exactly. That's a good
that big pool buoy.
And that I think comes from that one water experience and my year's expedition racing is that if I could offer, to those extreme swim runners like that level of having to deal with teamwork and sleep deprivation is pretty rad. I mean, it doesn't feel rad when you're doing it, but it's pretty rad every time you do it.
Once you come out the other end.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you from all the sleep dev talk we've had from when we did these one water race recaps, it's like, I think I still need a couple more years to kind of get the chutzpah to do that. Yeah, but what's really great, Jason, is that, there's so much room within the sport to iterate and to try new things. I mean, one water race that was an idea and now it's a thing. Same thing with some of these super short course races that like EX Swimrun puts on this little sprint circuit and you just do a bunch of like hot laps.
There's heats
super
and
fun.
stuff.
Yeah, really fun. You know, something you could really spectate. I mean, there's just so much room for creativity here. And I mean, I love the idea of being like, all right, there's this whole section, can get permits for it. It can be this total experience and we'll see what happens. I mean, it's great.
It's all downriver too, Chris.
It's all downriver.
All downriver. It's all downriver. Yeah. And you know, it's really nice meeting you guys and meeting some of the other, you know, the people that are into this, because again, it reminds me a lot of the community that I fell in love with adventure racing, that it really is, you know, just a bunch of adventure athletes like that really are stoked about what they're doing and the possibilities and the newness. And I think Swimrun is in that magical age when like the people that are doing it, you know, you're just de facto part of a kind of club, like this weird, odd kid athlete club that you're just like, hey, look at what we're doing. Right. And I think there's more and more people really looking for that and looking kind of outside. And there's nothing against triathlon. I was a triathlete for years too, but you know, there's just, it's more of like a prepackaged thing. I think you go to a swim run and there's still this like, this is new. There's a lot of things to understand. There's a lot of things that could go wrong that I could drastically get better at or worse at race to race. And you know.
And as a participant, I think even in these smaller races, like I know the one that we did in Folsom is you're doing something that most people probably never really anticipated that they could be doing it. It's so sort of outside the box of whatever normalcy they're used to. It is such a more fulfilling experience completing that. Like, oh, I swam across the river and then I ran down and I did it. And it took me 2 hours, but I never, you know, talk about exciting water cooler talk, you know, oh, you didn't run the 10K for the turkey trot. You were swimming and running all over the place in the river. It's just a much more, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're serving the Kool-Aid at this point.
And guzzling it too.
So another thing that to me is impressive about swimrun, and this is, if done right, the impressive thing about adventure racing, more so than triathlon or marathon or a lot of other things, is the pictures of swimrun. Like they just like a well done picture by a good photographer, you know, not of people like chilling out high-fiving. I'm talking like crawling out of the water dripping off them while they look like they're in the middle of a bonk. Like those photos, just there's something about that to me in the modern age, having kind of been through the traditional sports, like it's just this badass sense of adventure and endurance and suffering and willpower, like captured in that image. Which is, you know, there are very few things. There's two things like that I do that every time I see a picture of it, I'm just like, oh, that just to me says adventure. And one is like bike pack rafting, where you like put your bike on an inflatable pack raft and then like paddle down somewhere and then roll your boat up and then ride crazy trails and do a big trip like that. Like if you see a picture of a guy with an inflatable boat and a bike strapped to it going down whitewater,
you know something's going on.
And it really is the same thing when somebody is sprinting in a wetsuit, like next to some rocky shoreline with a bungee attached to them and some other person like getting towed or like diving off into the water. You're just like, I don't know exactly what's going on. Like my parents see a picture of something, they're like, I don't know what's going on, but that looks really dangerous. Like that's just, you know, and that's kind of cool to be involved in a sport where the imagery tells more of that story of the emotions of why we get in it.
You know, I mean, it's funny you say that because I hadn't thought about it in that way, but I think how I found Swimrun and introduced Chipper to it pretty soon after was through photography and through like going down a YouTube kind of rabbit hole, which, you know, kudos to Attila back in the day, realizing that's like, hey, you want to try to grow this thing, good video, good stories, like that's what really captivates people, just as you mentioned.
Yeah. And you know, there's so much. You know, I spent most of my life as a climber before I got into endurance sports. So I was, you know, diehard climber for years. And it's neat that in swimrun, it feels like there's so many stories that haven't been told. Right? This is the same way I felt 20 years ago as a climber. Like there was so many, like everybody was having their own epics, their own stories, their own epiphanies. Like literally everybody in the sport is having these things and coming back for it. And, there's just a lot of creativity and growth in those moments, which I think, at some point, once sports get big enough that there is governing bodies and, 1,000 races, and, it's hard to hold on to that.
I mean, I think, with Swimrun specifically, I mean, I've been saying this since we started the show, which is like, hey, we're living in the golden age of swimrun, just as you mentioned, like the sport's super young. It kind of reminds you of sort of like trail running back in the 60s or triathlon back in the 80s, sort of the whole dirt baggy kind of mentality, like just biking in your Speedos type stuff. That it's like, I just always think it's important for our listeners and everyone just sort of appreciate where we're at, because at some point it is going to be different, and that's just the nature of things. And can it still be awesome? I mean, it stayed awesome for, the 15 some odd years that the sport's existed. So there's a good chance it can continue to stay awesome if the people who are promoting it are awesome.
Yeah.
But I said awesome way too many times. But anyway,
it's awesome.
What I'm saying, it is awesome. But I think it's so cool that you're putting on events, because like, in the chapter of the history of swimrun in America, like now Bend, Oregon, has its own place.
Mm-hmm.
The Wikipedia page probably soon.
Yeah. Okay. So which one of you, I want to know, like, which one of you guys are going to end up out here for?
Well, we're definitely, I mean, everything, we have small children. So when we say definite, we mean highly probably. We're definitely going to do Sunriver. And then Elk Lake is a little tough because we have Casco Bay, I think the week before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's sandwiched in between a few other.
Yeah. So we still have to talk to the wives a little bit to get the permission, but
pending approvals.
I think there's a good chance, because new races. I mean, that's what we're here for too. I mean, we want to have new swimrun experiences, and we love going back to Casco every year. Again, the race is always different, but to just try something completely new. I mean, we experienced that last year when we did a Swimrun. I mean, we did a couple. Obviously, we did a bunch of races for the first time, but after we did the World Championship, we went to North Carolina for Swimrun NC, and that race in particular just felt so different from any other swimrun we've done. It was like a little bit in a river, a lot of it in this lake, this kind of weird loop course where you go up this huge climb, and I mean, it was such a unique kind of swimrun experience. It's like, that's the juice, It's not like, I'm not going to win a race. Chipper and I are going to win races. Yeah. We're going to try to do a good job and stuff. But for us, is really about the experience and just like swim running in different places.
Yeah, absolutely. And funny that you mentioned NC. I was just watching the highlight reel again because I was telling somebody about it, and I was watching. I'm like, God, this is so fun. And it's the least, I would say, I mean, this isn't a knock against Swimrun NC, but it's the least traditional kind of swim run, I guess, because it kind of has a circuit course to it a little bit. But that part was a lot of fun too. And it doesn't matter where or how it's laid out or what the distance is or whatever. Yeah. If you're just going to have a good time. Yeah, that's the sales pitch.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be now. How many races do you guys? Like, how many races do you do a season or a year?
Well, last year we did six.
Okay.
And this year we're gonna do 6 again, I think.
But we said we were gonna race less. But
we said that. But when there's a race in our own freaking time zone and we don't have to fly to North Carolina a couple times or some other random place a couple times, I mean, it just makes it, and it's a new race. I mean, it's kind of hard to say no.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we're really looking forward to is like Chris mentioned earlier about the NC sort of swimrun scene that's over there, and between Swimrun NC and Swimrun Lake James and that whole crew down there has a really strong, good thing going, and that's something that really, I guess, we're kind of craving for on the West Coast as well. Is like, where can we sort of put a stake in the ground? Like, okay, here's the cool West Coast place where all the fun swim runs are going to be. Selfishly, we want it to be in California, but we'll settle for Oregon for now.
Yeah. Well,
just next door.
It's just
that's
California's hat.
That's pretty cool. So when you guys choose races and how far apart? Like, again, I'm just curious as an athlete. Like, do most people do a couple weeks between races if they're really serious? Can they do a race every weekend?
I think the big problem with your statement is assuming that they're swim run weeks apart. So for example, last year we had a race in March, and then we didn't have anything until July. Just because there
was no
events.
races. There
just weren't events. So this year our season's going to start at Sunriver, and then we'll have it pretty packed. And we put our names in the hat for the World Championship again. So if that happens, that'll obviously be like the A race for everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, basically all the swimruns going to be within 4 months of each other.
Yeah, the season's a bit more compressed into late spring, summer. Time for sure.
Yeah. Well, what about Florida? Aren't there any swimruns in Florida?
No, there was going to be one this year, but they had some permit issues, so they ended up pulling the plug on it. But yeah. I mean, a lot of it is just, the fact that so many triathletes and race directors don't even know swimrun exists. Yeah. I mean, some of it is just getting it on people's radar. Yeah. And then there are some race directors in the East Coast that are like, oh, I'm putting on a triathlon here, so let me just also add a swimrun, kind of option here. And what we've seen with those is there's a sort of one and dones, because it's just, you can't just be like, oh, let me just make some extra revenue from this band of people. You actually have to be thoughtful about the event you're putting on. Yeah. For example, the race we did in Folsom, first year race, sort of a trail run / triathlon, open water swim kind of race director, doing a bunch of different types of multi-sport events.
But 20, 30 years experience on races.
He put on, for a first year race, and put on an awesome race. It was super fun. You're sort of crossing the Folsom River a couple times, and it was good because I think the intent was right.
Yeah.
And we just need more people to kind of fall in love with the sport and kind of put races on with that intent. And again, just like with triathlon, you got to have all these local mom and pop, sprint and Olympic local races, so people can cut their teeth on that before they step up to 70.3s and Ironmans and whatnot. Swimrun just kind of doesn't have it. So I think there's a little bit of a fear that goes into there. And we hear it from listeners all the time. It's like, oh, I was super scared for my first race. I don't know what's going on. Yeah. And it's just we try to give them as much information as possible to mitigate that. But what really mitigates that is having local events that are sort of very low pressure. You can just do your local sprint, short course swim run, and then do Casco, or then do, Orcas, or, one of these other longer races.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're just not there yet.
No. And I mean, I think it's going to get there though, because the other thing that is amazing is an endurance athlete, you can just travel with carry-on. I mean, you can do that running, but again, you don't really have that adventure. That's, and if you're a multi-sport athlete, but if I was still a triathlete and I discovered swimrun, I think I would just say, I don't really need to ride my bike that much. Or I don't need to fly with it because it's such a pain in the butt. Right. And, and you get that same kind of multi-sport feel. And to me, you get a lot more adventure because you don't have to be anywhere near roads. Right. And you can't really do a triathlon without having, big road, right, somewhere. Yeah. So yeah, I'm like, come on, everybody just travel. Just throw your wetsuit and some shoes and a bag and
that's all you need.
Flying out the world. Right.
We'll definitely be doing our part to try to get people out there, Jason, because cool. We're super stoked that you're putting these races on, and as a new swimrun race director, I mean, we're here to help any way we can, and it's not just us. I'm sure we have a small army of people that if you needed someone to talk to about course setting and thoughts, they'd give them. So
I'll be super happy for any feedback from you guys or any of the racers. We're going to be pretty transparent that we know our business for AR, so we think we can put on a good event, but we also want to know what the community likes and make it as challenging as we feel like we can and want to, but we're not trying to be the definitive swim run. We just want to make awesome events and have you guys come out.
That's it. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, that's the mindset right there. And I think with that sort of outlook and perspective on things, you seem poised for success.
Yeah, we're stoked for you. We're stoked to do these races. And Jason, thanks so much for taking the time. Mm-hmm. Anyone who's interested, just go to benracing.com. You'll see the information there, and hit us up if you need more info. But we'll be there, so hopes to see you all there.
Yeah, we'll try to throw a little classic low tide boys shakeout swim run with Chris and Renee and some of the other Bend Racing folks from the One Water race. Chris already told us to bring our warmest suit for the river.
Yes, for Sunriver. It's going to be 58 to 60 degrees. So bring your.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
That's fine.
That's perfect swimming weather. But Jason, thank you so much for taking the time. Appreciate you, and best of luck this year. And we'll see you in a couple months.
But yeah, thank you guys, and I look forward to meeting you in person. It's been awesome chatting, and I do warn you that I want to take you out for a beer and like pick your brains when you're out here, both as an athlete, as an event director, all kinds of. I just started my own podcast, like with 3 episodes in, so I have so many questions in so many ways. So it'll be fun to go for a beer after the run.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Well, we'll see you in May, Jason.
Yep. Thanks. Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swim run.
Sign up for our newsletter at lowtideboys.com. That's boys with a Z. And check out our meme page at the Low Tide Boys on Instagram. If you have any suggestions for the show or questions for us, send us a DM or an email at lowtideboys@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of all our swim run activities, podcast, and other stuff.
Yeah, other stuff. Way to keep it PG. Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
Go for a run.
Then another swim.
Then another run.
And then another swim.
And then another run.
And then just keep going. Until you're done.
Or maybe can't
and
stop.
Stop.